we'll start with the basics and we'll go into the details of the things that you want to understand more. Basically, what are neurotransmitters and what are neuropeptides and what are the novel neurotransmitters? And what are neurotropins? These are what will essentially form a basic concept or a basic idea of neurochemistry, right? So can anyone tell me a couple of neurotransmitters?
Serotonin, dopamine,
Yeah.
glutamate, GABA,
Okay. Okay.
acetylcholine,
Okay.
noradrenaline,
Okay. Now, why did I group these three together?
is catecholamines,
Yeah, also known as monoamines, right? Very important paper A question. They'll ask you which one of the following is not a monoamine. All right. And what are glutamate and GABA?
amino acids,
These are amino acids. And what is acetylcholine? It is essentially made up of acetyl-CoA, which is a product of the Krebs cycle.
yes.
Right. All right. So now some of the basic MCQs that they'll ask you regarding these basic neurotransmitters is, what is the main main antagonistic or main what do you say, I forgot the word to describe it. What is the main stimulatory? Yeah, what is the main stimulatory neurotransmitter in the nervous system? And what is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter in the nervous system? These are MCQs that the college asks almost every other year. So the main stimulatory neurotransmitter in your nervous system is glutamate. And the main inhibitory neurotransmitter in your nervous system is the GABA, right? Okay, good. And where do the benzodiazepines work?
GABA,
GABA.
Where exactly on GABA?
Chloride channel.
GABA A. So essentially, the GABA neurotransmitter is a neurotransmitter which contains a chloride channel, right?
yes, sir.
So if this were your cell membrane, and this is the GABA, how many rosettes should I make to this flower?
7.
5. Right? And where does the GABA A act? It acts on mainly the alpha, because there are two alpha subunits of the GABA pentamer, right? Remember, GABA is a pentamer, and what it does is it has a chloride channel in the central part. And you have to remember what is the difference between benzodiazepines and barbiturates, right? So remember that barbiturate sounds similar to duration, churates and durates, right? So barbiturates will increase the duration of the opening of chloride channels, whereas benzodiazepines will increase the
Frequency.
frequency. Great, good answer. Clear so far?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Now, another couple of very important concepts. What are the types of receptors of any neurotransmitter? So, give me a couple of examples of inotropic receptors. Hello, am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, give me a couple of examples of inotropic receptors. GABA. Right. So what would you
Yes, sir.
say is an inotropic receptor? Tropic means attraction. Right. So the ones that are associated with ions, so like this chloride channel ion, the ones which modulate the entry or exit of ions is essentially an inotropic receptor, and one that alters the metabolism is a metabotropic receptor. Is this basic concept all right?
Yes, sir.
Now, because the inotropic receptor just acts and modulates the effect on a particular ion, it will be short-lived. Right? Whereas what a metabotropic receptor does is, if you go back to your second year, your pharmacology, basic pharmacology, what you'll remember is there were certain secondary messengers.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And what do these secondary messengers do?
Basically, enzyme changes, phosphorylation, dephosphorylation, leading to further metabolic changes accordingly.
And how do they cause these metabolic changes?
This enzyme phosphorylation, dephosphorylation, leading to activation and inactivation of a cycle.
Okay, so they may act via the enzymes, or they may also act via DNA transcription.
Yeah.
Right. So these changes would essentially be short-lived, or they would be long-lasting.
Long-lasting.
Right. Where does alcohol work again?
GABA receptors.
Again, yeah, it works on the GABA receptors, and its mechanism of action is very similar to benzodiazepines. It also increases the frequency of opening of the chloride channels. And this is where the concept of stimulatory substances and CNS stimulants and CNS depressants comes, right? So if you understand this concept of stimulation and inhibition well, the reason why I've chosen this board is because you'll be able to have a good bird eye view of everything, right? So if you understand this concept of stimulation and inhibition well, you'll realize name me any one or two CNS stimulants, anyone?
Nicotine.
Amphetamine.
Amphetamine,
Lyserg.
anything else?
Nicotine.
Okay, but a more
Cocaine.
classical one would still be
LSD.
cocaine, right? LSD is essentially classified as a hallucinogen more than a CNS stimulant, but MDMA is again a stimulant. And what would be? Give me a couple of examples of CNS depressants.
Alcohol.
Alcohol.
Yep, alcohol. Then
Sir, benzodiazepine.
Okay.
opioid, benzodiazepines. So essentially what these do is that they depress the CNS hyperactivity and they lead to a good sound sleep, psychomotor retardation, right? And that's why when these are not obtained, the withdrawal would be autonomic activity, autonomic nervous system hyperactivity. Makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So if you gain this concept of CNS depressants and how benzodiazepines act, you will easily be able to remember this concept of CNS depressants, CNS stimulants, and this is a very, very commonly asked question because they will ask you that which one of these is not a CNS stimulant or which one of these is not a CNS depressant. Am I going, is it getting too complicated or is it all right?
It's fine, sir.
Perfect. All right. Any questions so far?
Sir, regarding alcohol, I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
As it is classified as a CNS depressant, but we do know that it varies with the level of alcohol, as we have traditionally studied in pharmacology.
Yeah.
So how is that explained on the neurochemical basis?
So initially, what alcohol does, you're referring to the loss of inhibition during the initial part and then the
Yes, yes.
dizziness and sedation, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
what alcohol does initially is it gives a calming effect. So specifically, like you might have noticed that everyone does not have this loss of inhibition when they
Hmm.
have alcohol. It is usually the people who are, very composed and very anxious in their pre-morbid personality. So it has something to do with the pre-morbid personality as well. A person who is very anxious, who has a lot of inhibitions, who is very, understated, will have this loss of inhibition in the initial part because alcohol in that case would calm down a person's anxiety, won't it?
Right.
Because it works like a benzodiazepine. So it will work as an anxiolytic. It will calm down the anxiety. It will, and if you want to get into the neuroanatomical aspects of it, it will essentially work on the hypothalamus. It will reduce the sympathetic hyperactivity, which is caused because of the anxiety, right? Because they have a hyper functioning amygdala, they have a uh, hyper functioning hypothalamus which causes sympathetic hyperstimulation. These all will be calmed down and this will give a give a sense of peace and confidence to that person, which will lead to him having loss of inhibitions, and that might come across as not depressing, not CNS depressant, and rather a feeling of euphoria or elation.
All right.
Makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Anything else besides that? All right. So we, just to gather my thoughts right now, we understood what monoamines are, what amino acid neurotransmitters are, what acetylcholine is. We understood what ionotropic and metabotropic receptors are, what is the main stimulatory inhibitory neurotransmitter, how do ionotropic and metabotropic receptors differ, what are CNS stimulants and what are CNS depressants. All right, shall I move ahead?
Yeah.
All right. So, what are the main pathways that dopamine has? Can anyone name the main pathways of
Mes-
dopamine?
Mesolimbic, mesocortical.
Nigrostriatal.
Okay. I hope this looks a little bit like the brain. Is it all right? Is it identifiable? All right. So this is essentially the basal ganglia, right here. And where would you say I draw the mesolimbic pathway? Does anyone have any doubts regarding this basic diagram? This is somewhere where the the hypothalamus would be somewhere here. The pituitary would be somewhere here. We have the basal ganglia here. Somewhere around the here would be the thalamus, right? This is the frontal lobe. This is the parietal, temporal, and the occipital. Is it all right? Just a basic overview of the anatomy so that you can visualize the tracts. All right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if this is the ventral tegmental area, the mesolimbic pathway goes from the ventral tegmental area to
Nucleus accumbens.
it is a part of the thalamus or the basal
Limbic
ganglia.
system.
Yeah, but what part of the limbic system?
Basal ganglia.
Where in the basal ganglia?
The
Nucleus accumbens.
ventral striatum.
Exactly, ventral striatum. Yeah, that's the answer I'm looking for. It's a part of the ventral striatum within the basal ganglia, and nucleus accumbens is essentially known also as what part? The
Pleasure path. Pleasure
Reward.
path.
Reward
reward
pathway.
center,
Reward center.
right? So this is the first dopamine pathway, and that is the mesolimbic pathway, right? With me so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Then where do I make the mesocortical pathway?
From to frontal.
Right. Where in the
Ventral
frontal lobe? Let's go
ventral
deep
tegment-
inside the frontal lobe. Where in the frontal lobe?
Prefrontal cortex.
Let's go deeper into the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is also essentially divided into how many parts?
Ventromedial
And
Ventral-
dorsolateral.
dorsolateral.
3 parts. Dorsolateral, ventromedial, and
Ventrolateral.
right. So I'll tell you, the prefrontal cortex is the newest part of the brain. Everyone knows that?
Yes.
From the evolutionary point of view, it is the newest part of the brain. All right. So it's essentially, you can divide it into dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and the orbitofrontal cortex. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is essential for anyone?
Executive functions.
And what is
Cognition.
executive function? What do you mean by executive function? Planning,
Like coming on time.
Speaking.
Uh,
sequencing.
sequ-
What would be the easiest test to check any person's executive function?
Wrist, thumb, Which there is a
Make a
activity.
list.
Yeah.
The easiest way to check whether a person is able to have his executive functions is to make a list of things you want to do today, make a list of things you need to shop, make a
Planning.
list of things that are on your mind today, right? So planning, sequencing, and chaining of events is something that the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex does, and it is what is essentially known as executive function. See, these are the reason why I'm going into these this much detail and trying to simplify it is because these are very important concepts, and it took me a long time, and referring to so many different books to gain these concepts. And if you are able to understand these concepts very clearly, then then psychopathology will follow, because you know how the normal parts of these parts work, and that's why you'll be able to tell anyone what happens when they don't, right? Is it all right?
Yeah.
And what do you think the ventromedial part of the prefrontal cortex does?
Effect.
Right. So essentially it modulates affect, and the easiest way to check it is to check motivation, right? So has anyone heard about the amotivational syndrome?
Yes, sir.
So that is something which happens when the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate gyrus, both of them are hampered. All right. And what does the orbitofrontal cortex do?
Response inhibition.
Yeah. So what will happen when the orbitofrontal cortex is damaged?
Repetitive behavior or
Yeah, I know that everyone knows that the orbitofrontal cortex is inhibited, is damaged in OCD, but essentially the answer that you gave was a very important one. That it in normal circumstances, what it does it causes inhibition, right? It puts in a word of rational thinking, and it tells your brain that it's not all right to wash your hands 7 or 8 hours a day. It's not all right to pass lewd or stupid or inappropriate comments, and that's why in frontotemporal dementia, a person will present with loss of inhibition, with very sexual or profane innuendos, and would abuse a lot. And that sense of inhibition is essentially something which is controlled by the orbitofrontal cortex. Some people also call it the hedonic hotspot. Hedonic means pleasure, so a lot of people do call it the hotspot for pleasure. But as far as our understanding of psychopathology is concerned, I think this is the more important part, because this will help you understand the psychopathology of OCD and that of frontotemporal dementia as well. Right? So three important parts of the prefrontal cortex: the dorsolateral, ventromedial, and orbitofrontal. And this tract is the mesocortical pathway. Right? So what happens in schizophrenia is that there is a hyperstimulation of the mesolimbic pathway and a hypostimulation of the mesocortical pathway. And I think everyone knows this, so I'm just rushing through this a little bit. Is that the mesolimbic pathway hyperfunction is responsible for the positive symptoms, that is delusions, hallucinations, and the mesocortical is responsible for the negative symptoms, that is the cognitive loss, the loss of affect, the loss of executive functions, and essentially whatnot. Is that all right? Is it all right?
yeah.
Then this pathway is also a dopaminergic pathway, And this pathway is known as the tuberoinfundibular pathway. And when there is normal dopamine secretion, what it does is it inhibits excess secretion of dopamine. Excess secretion of prolactin. Right? And what happens when we give an antipsychotic drug is that this inhibition is lost, and that's why there is hyperprolactinemia. Can anyone give me names of two drugs which are most prone to cause hyperprolactinemia? Again, very important MCQ for your paper A and paper B both. I'm sure anyone would be able to name at least one medication which causes hyperprolactinemia.
Risperidone, sir.
Great. Good answer. Risperidone. And another one?
Amisulpride.
Great. Right. And which is a safe antipsychotic as far as hyperprolactinemia is concerned?
Aripiprazole.
Aripiprazole.
Great. Now, why so? Okay, we'll cover that after we cover this nigrostriatal pathway. That's all right. And what is the nigrostriatal pathway? Where does it start from?
Substantia nigra.
Pars compacta or pars gelatinosa?
Compactor.
Great. So it starts from the SNPC and it goes into the what do we say? Goes into the basal ganglia. And what happens in Parkinsonism? Can anyone tell me? So what happens in Parkinsonism is that there is atrophy of the substantia nigra pars compacta, and enough dopamine is not produced. And just tell me the three main features of Parkinsonism.
Rigidity, bradykinesia, tremors.
Right. So I can go on and explain you why these three things happen by getting into more detail about the basal ganglia, which will also help you understand why EPS happens and why we use anticholinergics to treat EPS. Do you want me to go into extreme details regarding that? Hello?
Yes, sir.
So it's not something which is very important as far as your exams are concerned, but a lot of you might have wondered why we use anticholinergics for something which is for a mechanism for the side effect of a medication which blocks dopamine, right? All right. So we'll get into details of that only if we need to, because I don't think that's very important as far as your exams is concerned. You need to know about the direct and indirect pathways of the basal ganglia, how they work, and what is the role of acetylcholinergic circuits in that. It is definitely very interesting, but not really important as far as your exams are concerned. So what happens is, has anyone heard about the 80% rule in antipsychotics?
Yes, it has to block 80% of receptors to be effective, to show the effect.
Right, exactly. So an antipsychotic needs to block at least 80% of D1, D2, D3, D4, D5. Which one receptors?
D2 receptors.
It has to block at least 80% of D2 receptors to show some effect. And very close to that 80% range lies this range for EPS and hyperprolactinemia, right? So then why does aripiprazole and clozapine, these two molecules, why do they not cause these side effects?
Partial D1
Partial D2 agonists, aripiprazole.
Great. Partial D2 agonist. Anything besides that? Aripiprazole is also an agonist at 1A, and it is also an antagonist at 5-HT.
2A.
Right. So what it does is that there is this long complicated mechanism for which you can study it on STAL, is that because it causes partial agonism of the 5-HT1A, it reduces the amount of dopamine inhibition. So it essentially balances out the dopamine level in the nigrostriatal pathway. And that's why it has lesser chances of causing EPS and lesser chances of causing hyperprolactinemia as well, because it balances out the dopamine dysfunction which happens in those two tracts because of this. And clozapine, where does clozapine work?
D4.
It works on the D4, right? So these are again really important concepts which you need to remember for your exams. I know this was a really complicated concept. Is it all right? Any doubts so far?
No, sir.
Right. So it was really essential to look at the normal functioning of dopamine. How do antipsychotics work? What are the normal pathways? And how do we make sure that we understand the common adverse effects of antipsychotics, right? We can go on to discuss glutamate and GABA. Do you want to continue today, or do you want to continue some other time? How many of you can carry on today?